Today's devotion is called Don Your Royal Robes. And we are on March the 4th, day 63. And today's morning rinse is Esther 5 through 7. I love Esther, by the way. Have I told you that I love Esther? So today's featured verse is Esther 5:1. So if you haven't read the morning rinse, go ahead and read that and come on back and we'll talk about the devotional and featured verse. Esther 5:1 says, "Now it came about on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace." So if you guys are anything like me, you probably have several different versions of the Bible or several different translations. I even have several copies of older Bibles from my dad, and so I've got multiple versions. Most of them are from the King James Version, but I also have the NASV, the New American Standard Version Bible, and that's what this devotion is pulling from for the most part. And I like the NASV. One of the things that I like about it, it's not necessarily my favorite translation over another translation, but I do like certain aspects of each one of them. And one of the things that I like about the NASV version, it labels or puts titles on the chapters. And the title of chapter 5 in my version is called Esther Intercedes for the Jews. The interesting thing about that title is that when I was reading that translation, nowhere in this chapter does it say that Esther prayed. And yet I have always thought that the word intercede means to intensely pray. So, like if you watch movies about, like The War Room, if you haven't watched that movie, Claire has a prayer closet and she intercedes. And growing up in a Pentecostal background, anytime you hear the word intercede, you kind of equate that to intensely praying, intensely focusing, and, interceding. And also to, I'm Pentecostal and I grew up with the speaking in tongues and all of that. So that's where my interpretation of the word intercede comes from. And, I have to chuckle because this thought process probably all came from that Pentecostal background. Well, so interestingly enough, I decided to look up the word intercede and see what the definition of it was on dictionary.com. And when I looked it up, it defines it as this. It says to act or interpose. And interpose means to step in. So to act or interpose on behalf of someone in difficulty or trouble as by pleading or petitioning. So when I was reading the definition and I was kind of pondering it and studying it, I noticed that there are actually two parts to interceding. One is acting and one is pleading. So let me read the definition again. It's to act or interpose, stepping in, on behalf of someone in difficulty or trouble, as by pleading or petitioning. So you've got the acting and you've got the pleading. And when we are interceding, we're really pleading for God to give an answer or heal someone or, intercede for someone on, we're going to him pleading on their behalf. So we know that Esther called a corporate fast with the Jews for 3 days. And that was because of Haman's plot to kill her people. And they pleaded to God through their prayers. But the second part of interceding that we often miss is the action that we might need to take to intercede for someone. So on the third day of that fast, after they had been pleading to God, Esther took action and she prepared a banquet for the king. So then she prepared herself by putting on her royal robes to go before the king to invite him and Haman to that banquet. Now, remember, yesterday we talked about preparation. Well, she was doing all kinds of preparation for this moment. She put action to her steps. She was not just, doing the pleading. She was putting action to her steps despite the risk of being killed for inviting herself into the king's presence. It's interesting. She did not just sit in her prayer closet and ask God to change the king's heart or miraculously open up his eyes to Haman's evil scheme. Yeah, she could have done that, and she could have said, God, would you do this thing? Would you miraculously open up his eyes and show him the plot that Haman has? Instead, she rose, and she herself allowed God to use her to be the one to expose the plan. Despite the risk, despite the fear that she had, she rose and allowed God to use her. And through her bravery and through her personal actions of interceding, she saved her people. Haman had convinced the king to issue a decree ordering the extermination of all the Jews. And this decree was actually unable to be revoked. There was this day where this attack was going to come, and it was unable to be revoked. And the Jews in this decree were not even supposed to defend themselves. They were just supposed to basically accept what was about ready to happen to their whole entire people. But through Esther's bold actions and through her acts, she revealed her identity as a Jew to the king, as well as she revealed Haman's scheme to kill her people. Well, Haman was ultimately hanged, and Mordecai took his place. And then a new decree was written, which allowed the Jews the right to defend themselves on the day of the attack, instead of merely just accepting the fate of execution. So this attack was not able to be reversed, but the fact that the Jews were able to defend themselves is what saved them. You may not be the one positioned to go before a king, or even in a dire situation, you might not be the one to be the voice in that situation. But when your time comes to do that, will you don your royal robes? Will you be brave and put them on? So today's challenge to dig deep is look at the world around you. And in your world, is there a need? And I know that we've talked about needs in the past, whether that be needs of the poor. This is asking you to do that again. In your world around you, is there a need? If you see something, then commit to not only praying for that need, but ask God to help you be open to taking action, which would be steps to be part of the solution. Now, I've spoken about this before. We can get easily entangled into complaining about maybe our church, or complaining about something that people don't like what the pastor's doing, or even complaining about something that the pastor said that, triggered them. No one is perfect. And I will say this again. If God has called you to a specific church, and that pastor is doing everything in his power, everything, seeking God and remaining humble and remaining repentant and remaining steadfast in his faith and walking it out and doing the very best he can and holding himself accountable and having accountability around him, and you come in with your opinion, I don't know that. If it's a critical spirit, God's not going to honor that. And, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if there is a need, not a critical situation, but if there is a need, and if you are remaining open to allowing God to take action, then what could that be? I'm challenging you to just look at the needs around you. Put on your royal robes and go make a difference. You might just save a life, or many. Tonight, when you sit down at your journal, I want you to reflect on the word intercede. And realize that it's two parts. There's physical and literal action, and there's the pleading. And we oftentimes forget the action. But in this chapter, Esther interceded by doing both, acting and pleading. So I want you to write down the actions that you took today to intercede for someone. And let me just say this, interceding for someone, yes, the definition of that, I'm going to read the definition again. It's an act to interpose or step in on behalf of someone in difficulty or trouble, as by pleading or petitioning. And sometimes somebody is going through something that is definitely a defining moment of them being in trouble. I mean, some things come to my mind where, maybe somebody just got arrested. Well, they're in trouble. Or maybe someone, was in a car accident. They're in trouble. One person's difficult situation may be something that is super, super difficult for that individual that you can meet the need for because you have strength in certain areas that person needs. Interceding is not just being in the prayer closet. It's acting and completely honoring somebody who is going through something that you have the ability to act on and help them. Maybe your spouse is having a difficult day with the kids. Do you know that it is actually interceding for them if you step in and say, okay, honey, why don't you go and take a quick shower? I've got this. Or, hey, honey, I know I just got home from work and it looks like dinner's not made yet. Not that she has to do all the cooking, but hey, I'll take over tonight and make dinner. If there's a need that is there, ask God, can I fulfill this need, or can I interpose or step in on behalf of someone in difficulty or in trouble, as by pleading or petitioning? Can you intercede for someone? And can this be something that you can do every day? Yes, Esther's intercession was to save a nation. We don't have to have that situation. We don't have to be, that big of our position to save a nation. We can save the one. So I encourage you to think around you and look around you to see if there's any needs. Just the one. If you focus on just the one, the ripple effect will come, and it could end up being many in the future. I look forward to hearing some of the actions that you took, whether that be today or in the future, to intercede for someone who is needing you, because only you can provide it the way that God wants you to. So until tomorrow, keep rinsing, reflecting, and repeating. God bless you.